Before I start, kindly click on the subscribe button. They say you never know the value of what you have until it's gone. But I'd argue it's worse than that. Sometimes you destroy what you value most with your own hands, in a single careless moment you can't take back. 7 seconds. That's all it took to dismantle 7 years of marriage. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I stood in our empty penthouse, staring at the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that once represented everything I thought we'd achieve together. The divorce papers lay on the marble counter where Alexander had placed them before walking out. 48 hours earlier, we'd been celebrating our anniversary at the Celestial, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. Now I was alone, with nothing but the echo of my mistakes keeping me company. But I should start at the beginning. Alexander Reed wasn't just wealthy, he was dynasty wealthy, third-generation billionaire with a fortune that made other rich men seem middle class. When we met at a charity gala 5 years before our marriage, I was a gallery assistant with student loans and dreams bigger than my bank account. He was intelligent, driven, and unexpectedly humble for someone who'd never known anything but extreme privilege. Our connection was instant and electric. "You're the only person in this room who didn't research my net worth before speaking to me," he'd said that night, his steel-grey eyes crinkling at the corners. What followed was a whirlwind romance, a fairy-tale wedding, and 7 years of what I believed was unshakable love. Alexander was intensely private despite his public profile. He guarded his emotions carefully, a necessity, he explained, when everyone wanted something from you. But with me, he'd always been different. I was the one person he trusted completely. Until our anniversary night. The Celestial had been impossible to book, even for Alexander. But he'd made it happen because he knew how much I'd wanted to experience Chef Laurent's legendary tasting menu. Everything that evening had been perfect, the private dining room with its crystal chandeliers, the rare vintage champagne, the way Alexander reached for my hand between courses. To us, he'd said, his eyes softer than I'd seen them in months. To 7 more years. And 7 after that. If only I'd left it there. If only I hadn't had that third glass of champagne. If only I hadn't noticed how our host, the restaurant's charismatic manager Jean-Luc, kept finding reasons to visit our table personally. "I think he's quite taken with you," I whispered to Alexander after Jean-Luc had poured our wine with theatrical flourish, his French accent thick as honey. Alexander simply shrugged. "He's paid to be attentive." But something reckless stirred in me when Jean-Luc returned with our dessert course. Perhaps it was the champagne, or some childish desire to provoke a reaction from my increasingly work-distracted husband. Whatever the reason, when Jean-Luc leaned in to describe the delicate chocolate creation before us, I touched his arm and held his gaze a beat too long. "You've made our anniversary absolutely unforgettable," I said, my voice dropping to a register I usually reserved only for Alexander. "I may have to come back to see you again soon." Jean-Luc's eyebrows rose slightly, but he maintained his professional demeanor. Alexander, however, went completely still. "Just teasing," I laughed, squeezing Alexander's hand. "Don't look so serious, darling." But something had shifted in the atmosphere. Alexander's smile didn't return, and the wall I'd occasionally glimpsed between us over recent months suddenly seemed impenetrable. "Alexander," I said in the car ride home, the silence becoming unbearable. "It was just a silly joke." "Was it?" he asked quietly, staring straight ahead, his profile sharp against the city lights. Because from where I was sitting, it looked like my wife flirting with another man on our anniversary. "That's ridiculous," I protested, embarrassment making my voice rise. "I was just being friendly." "You're completely overreacting." He turned to look at me then, and the coldness in his eyes made my heart stutter. "Am I, Eliza? Because it seems to me that you've been friendly quite a lot lately. With my colleague at the Christmas party. With that tennis instructor at the club. Always just joking, always just being friendly. What are you implying?" I asked, suddenly defensive. "I'm not implying anything," he said, turning away again. "I'm simply observing a pattern." When we arrived home, he didn't pour our traditional nightcap. Instead, he went straight to his study and closed the door. I told myself he just needed time to cool off, that we'd laugh about this in the morning. I was wrong. At 2 a.m., I woke to find his side of the bed empty. Wrapping myself in my silk robe, I padded through our penthouse, finally finding him standing at the window in the living room, still in his dinner clothes, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. "Alexander," I whispered. He turned, and in the dim light, I could see he'd been crying, something I'd witnessed only twice before in our relationship. My stomach dropped as he placed his glass down with deliberate care. "I can't do this anymore, Eliza." The words hung in the air between us like a physical thing. "Do what?" I asked, though some part of me already knew the answer. "Pretend." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "Pretend that we're still the same people who fell in love 7 years ago. Pretend I don't see how restless you've become. Pretend I don't notice how your eyes wander." "Alexander, no," I started, but he held up his hand. "I've called my lawyer. He'll be bringing papers in the morning. I'm giving you the penthouse, the house in the Hamptons, and a settlement that ensures you'll never want for anything." "I don't want your money," I cried, panic rising in my chest. "I want you." "This is insane, you're ending our marriage over one stupid comment." He looked at me then with such profound sadness that my protests died in my throat. "No, Eliza. I'm ending it because when you made that stupid comment, I realized something. I realized I've been waiting for this moment for years. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for you to realize that you settled for me, for this life." "That's not true," I whispered, tears streaming down my face now. "Isn't it?" he asked softly. "Then why do you keep looking elsewhere? Why do you test boundaries? What are you searching for that I haven't given you?" I had no answer that didn't sound hollow, even to my own ears. And as the first light of dawn broke across the skyline, illuminating the face of the man I loved more than anything, I realized with horror that I might have just lost him forever. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would force me to confront truths about myself, my marriage, and what love really means when everything you thought you knew comes crashing down around you. The lawyer arrived precisely at 9 a.m. the next morning. Thomas Whitfield, Alexander's personal attorney for over a decade, couldn't quite meet my eyes as he laid out the divorce papers with clinical efficiency. His discomfort was palpable. He'd attended our wedding, for God's sake. He and his wife had dined in our home countless times. "He's already signed everything," Thomas said quietly. "The terms are extremely generous." I flipped through the pages, the legal jargon swimming before my tear-swollen eyes. $20 million. Full ownership of our properties. My name added to several of his charitable foundations. "I don't want his money," I repeated, my voice raw. "I want to talk to him." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "He's left the country, Eliza." The floor seemed to drop from beneath me. "What? Where did he go?" "I'm not at liberty to say." His expression was sympathetic but firm. He was explicit about not being contacted. "This is absurd." I slammed my palm on the documents. 7 years of marriage and he won't even talk to me? Over one stupid mistake. Thomas hesitated, adjusting his glasses, a nervous habit I'd noticed whenever he had something difficult to say. "Eliza. Alexander has been struggling for some time." This wasn't a snap decision. Those words hit me like a physical blow. What did he mean, struggling? Alexander and I shared everything. Didn't we? After Thomas left, I tried calling Alexander's cell. Straight to voicemail. I called his office. His executive assistant, normally warm and friendly, informed me coolly that Mr. Reed was unreachable and would be for the foreseeable future. I called his sister in Boston, who answered with uncharacteristic coldness. "He told me what happened, Eliza," Catherine said, her voice tight with disappointment. "I think you should respect his wishes right now." "Catherine, please," I begged. "It was a misunderstanding. I need to explain." "Did you know he's been seeing a therapist for the past year?" she interrupted. I fell silent. No. No, I didn't know that. He's been trying to figure out why he never feels like he's enough for you, she continued, each word a knife twisting deeper. Why his brilliant, beautiful wife seems increasingly bored by him, increasingly seeking attention elsewhere. That's not true, I whispered, but even as I said it, uncomfortable memories surfaced, moments when Alexander had reached for me and I'd been distracted, times I'd chosen nights out with friends over quiet evenings with him, the way I'd sometimes flirt harmlessly at parties while he watched from across the room. Isn't it? Catherine's voice softened slightly. Eliza, I love you. You've been like a sister to me. But Alexander has spent his entire life feeling like people only want him for what he can give them. He thought you were different. After we hung up, I wandered our penthouse like a ghost, noticing for the first time how few personal photographs we had displayed. Most were from the early days, our safari honeymoon, sailing in Greece, hiking in New Zealand. When had we stopped documenting our happiness? When had we stopped creating memories worth preserving? In his closet, I found evidence of his hasty departure, empty spaces where his favorite suits had hung, his travel toiletry bag missing. The antique watch case his grandfather had given him was gone. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the lingering scent of his cologne, and finally allowed myself to completely break down. 3 days passed in a haze of unanswered calls and increasingly desperate texts. I barely ate. Barely slept. My sister Olivia came to stay, alarmed by my incoherent phone calls. You need to pull yourself together, she said on the 4th morning, yanking open the curtains to let harsh sunlight stream into the bedroom. This isn't like you, Eliza. You don't understand, I mumbled from beneath the covers. He was everything to me. Then why did you keep pushing him away? She asked bluntly. I emerged from my cocoon to stare at her. What? Olivia sighed, sitting beside me on the bed. Look, I love you, but I've watched you with Alexander for years. You've always had one foot out the door, emotionally speaking. That's ridiculous, I protested. Is it? Remember Dad? The comparison felt like a slap across the face. Our father, brilliant, charming, and chronically unfaithful to our mother. He'd leave for weeks, sometimes months, then return with extravagant gifts and promises he never kept. After each heartbreak, Mom would take him back, until one day he left for good. I am nothing like him, I whispered fiercely. Maybe not, Olivia conceded. But you learned from him, just like I did. I became a pathological commitment phobe who can't sustain a relationship past 6 months. And you? What? I demanded when she trailed off. You test people. Push them away before they can leave you first. The moment things get too comfortable, too secure, you create distance. I've seen you do it with friends, with me sometimes, and definitely with Alexander. Her words pierced through the fog of self-pity I'd been wrapped in. Had I been sabotaging my own happiness? Creating problems where none existed? That evening, after Olivia left for a dinner meeting, I found myself in Alexander's study, the one room I'd avoided since his departure. It was his sanctuary, the place he retreated to when he needed space. I'd always respected that boundary, rarely entering without invitation. On his desk sat a leather-bound journal I'd never seen before. My fingers trembled as I opened it, recognizing Alexander's precise handwriting immediately. March 15th. Therapy again today. Dr. Harmon asked why I feel I don't deserve Eliza's love. Couldn't answer. The truth is, I've been waiting for her to realize she made a mistake marrying me since the day we met. She's so alive, so vibrant, she lights up every room. And I'm not that. I've built walls to protect myself for so long, I don't know how to tear them down, even for her. Especially for her. I flipped forward, tears blurring my vision. May 30th. Eliza seemed distant again tonight. When I asked if something was wrong, she laughed it off. Said I was imagining things. But I saw how she lit up talking to that new client at dinner. She never looks at me that way anymore. Dr. Harmon says I need to communicate these feelings instead of internalizing them. But how do you tell someone you're afraid they're falling out of love with you without sounding pathetic? And then, the final entry, dated our anniversary. July 10th. 7 years today. I had such hopes for tonight. Thought perhaps we could find our way back to each other. The distance between us has become a chasm I don't know how to cross. When she flirted with the restaurant manager, something inside me finally broke. It wasn't just the flirtation, it was the look in her eyes. A hunger for something I can't give her. I've made my decision. The hardest of my life. Sometimes loving someone means letting them go. The journal fell from my hands. All this time, while I'd been feeling increasingly restless without understanding why, Alexander had been silently drowning in insecurity and doubt. And instead of reaching out to him, I'd pushed him further away. My phone pinged with a text notification. Catherine. He's at the Tokyo office. Leaves for Singapore tomorrow. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I think he's making a mistake too. I stared at the message, my heart racing. Tokyo. 14 hours away. An impossible distance, and yet suddenly, a glimmer of hope. Before I could second-guess myself, I was on my laptop, booking a flight. I had no plan beyond getting to him, no idea what I would say when I found him. But for the first time since he walked out, I felt something other than despair. I was going to fight for my husband. Fight for our marriage. And in doing so, I would have to finally confront the truth about myself I'd been running from my entire life. Before I continue, kindly hit the subscribe button if you haven't. The 14-hour flight to Tokyo gave me nothing but time to think, to remember, to dissect every moment of our marriage with new, painful clarity. I barely slept, my mind replaying conversations, arguments, moments of connection and disconnection like a relentless highlight reel of my failures. I remember the night 3 years into our marriage when Alexander had prepared a surprise anniversary dinner at home. He'd spent hours cooking my favorite foods, set the table with candles, scattered rose petals. I'd arrived 2 hours late, caught up in a gallery opening I could have easily left. The disappointment in his eyes when I'd breezed in with casual apologies, how had I missed it? Or worse, had I seen it and simply dismissed it? The plane's cabin lights dimmed as we crossed the international date line. A woman across the aisle slept peacefully against her husband's shoulder, his arm protectively around her. I turned away, unable to bear the simple intimacy I'd taken for granted. My phone contained dozens of photos of Alexander I'd never really looked at, candid shots where he wasn't posing or smiling for the camera. In one, he sat on our terrace at sunset, reading, his profile gilded by golden light. In another, he slept, one arm stretched across what would have been my side of the bed. I zoomed in on his face in that one, noticing the slight furrow between his brows, as if he were troubled even in sleep. How long had he been unhappy? How had I not seen it? Tokyo greeted me with oppressive humidity and unfamiliar chaos. The text from Catherine had mentioned the Imperial Hotel, where Alexander always stayed when in Japan. My Mandarin was decent from business travel, but my Japanese was non-existent. Every interaction required twice the effort, amplifying my exhaustion and anxiety. I checked into a room 2 floors below where I suspected Alexander was staying, not ready to announce my presence until I had gathered my courage and my thoughts. Sleep evaded me as jet lag and nerves kept my mind racing. At 3 a.m., I found myself in the hotel bar, nursing a glass of whiskey, Alexander's drink, not mine. American, the bartender asked in accented English, polishing a glass with methodical precision. I nodded, turning the tumbler between my fingers. Business or pleasure? He smiled kindly. Neither, I admitted. I'm here to save my marriage. He raised his eyebrows but didn't comment further, sliding a bowl of edamame toward me instead. For strength, he said simply. As dawn broke over Tokyo's skyline, I showered, applied makeup with shaking hands, and chose my outfit with absurd care, as if the right dress could somehow fix what was broken between us. I opted for a simple blue wrap dress Alexander had once said brought out the color of my eyes. At 7:30 a.m., I positioned myself in the executive lounge where I knew Alexander would likely have breakfast before his meetings. My heart thundered against my ribs as I waited, rehearsing opening lines that all seemed woefully inadequate. At precisely 8:05, the elevator doors opened, and there he was. Alexander stepped into the lounge, impeccable in a charcoal suit, his attention on his phone. He looked thinner than I remembered, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting he'd been sleeping no better than I had. The sight of him knocked the air from my lungs. He was halfway to the breakfast buffet before he noticed me. When our eyes met, he froze, color draining from his face. Eliza. My name sounded like it had been pulled from him against his will. Alexander. I stood, legs trembling. Please, don't leave. Just give me 5 minutes. His jaw tightened, eyes darting toward the exit before settling back on me. After an excruciating pause, he nodded once, gesturing to the chair opposite mine. How did you find me? He asked, remaining standing. Catherine, I admitted. She's worried about you. We all are. I'm fine. The words were clipped, his expression carefully controlled. You shouldn't have come, Eliza. I had to. I stepped toward him, stopping when he subtly shifted away. Alexander, what happened between us, the things I did? I never understood what I was doing to you. To us. He laughed, a hollow sound entirely devoid of humor. That's the problem, isn't it? You never saw me. Not really. That's not true, I protested. No? His eyes met mine, challenging. Tell me then, Eliza. When did I start seeing Dr. Harmon? I swallowed hard. I don't know. 14 months ago. After your father's funeral. His voice softened slightly. You were so devastated, despite everything he'd done. I held you while you cried for 3 days. And then, when you emerged from that grief, it was like you couldn't bear to look at me anymore. Like I reminded you of something painful. The realization hit me with stunning clarity. My father, charming, unreliable, emotionally unavailable. The opposite of Alexander in every way that mattered. Yet somehow, after his death, I'd begun treating my steadfast, loving husband as if he were the one who might abandon me at any moment. I was pushing you away, I whispered, the truth of it finally crystallizing. Before you could leave me. Like he always did. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, the first crack in his armor. I thought. He hesitated. I thought you'd grown bored with me. That you regretted settling down with someone so contained. Contained. I echoed. I'm not spontaneous, Eliza. Not carefree or particularly exciting. I saw how you lit up around men who were, men like that restaurant manager, like your father. I tried to change for you, to be more of what I thought you wanted. I never asked you to change, I said, tears spilling down my cheeks. You didn't have to ask. His voice broke slightly. I could see it in your eyes every time they wandered to someone else. Every time you seemed disappointed when I came home, as if you'd been hoping for someone different to walk through that door. The lounge had emptied around us, other executives discreetly giving us privacy as the conversation intensified. I took another step toward him. I married you because you were nothing like my father, I said fiercely. Because you were reliable and honest and present. I loved those things about you, or I still do. But I was so afraid of losing you that I created distance to protect myself. I pushed you away because some broken part of me was waiting for you to leave, just like he always did. Alexander's composure finally faltered, his eyes suspiciously bright. You've never talked to me like this before. I've never been honest with myself before, I admitted. It took losing you to see what I was doing. For a moment, something like hope flickered across his face. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the fragile connection. He glanced at it, then back at me, conflict evident in his expression. I have a meeting. The Singapore team is already waiting. Alexander, please. I can't do this now, Eliza. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I need time. This isn't just about one night at a restaurant. It's about years of feeling like I wasn't enough. Let me prove to you that you are, I begged. That you always have been. He studied my face, as if searching for something he wasn't sure existed. I'm here until tomorrow. After my meetings, I'll be at the hotel bar at 9. If you still want to talk then. He left the invitation unfinished, but it was more than I dared hope for. As he walked away, back straight with the same quiet dignity I'd always admired, I felt something shift between us, not reconciliation, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. What I didn't know as I watched him disappear into the elevator was that our conversation had been observed by someone whose presence in Tokyo was far from coincidental, and whose connection to Alexander would shake the already fragile foundation beneath my feet. Before I continue, kindly hit the subscribe button. After Alexander left, I retreated to my room, emotionally drained yet cautiously hopeful. For the first time, we'd spoken honestly about the fractures in our marriage. It wasn't resolution, not even close, but it was something to build on. I ordered room service and tried to rest, knowing I needed clarity for our evening meeting. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by anxious planning of what to say, how to show Alexander the first truly understood what I'd done to us. At 3 p.m., restlessness drove me to the hotel's tranquil garden. The carefully arranged stones and flowing water provided a meditative backdrop as I rehearsed the words I hoped might begin to heal our wounds. You must be Eliza. The voice startled me from my thoughts. A woman stood on the path, elegant in a tailored navy suit, her dark hair cut in a sleek bob. Something in her posture radiated quiet confidence. She was beautiful in a subtle, refined way that made me immediately self-conscious. I'm sorry, do I know you? I asked, instinctively smoothing my rumpled dress. Naomi Tanaka. She extended her hand with practiced grace. I work with your husband. The way she said your husband carried an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. Possessiveness? Resentment? You're on Alexander's Singapore team, I guessed, accepting her handshake. A slight smile curved her lips. Not exactly. I'm the head of Reed International's Asian operations. Alexander reports to me when he's in this hemisphere. The revelation jolted me. Alexander had never mentioned his Tokyo superior was a woman. Let alone a woman who looked like she'd stepped from the pages of Vogue Business. I saw you together this morning, she continued, settling beside me on the stone bench. It seemed intense. That's one word for it, I said cautiously. He's been different since arriving in Tokyo. Her eyes studied me with uncomfortable perception. Distracted. I assumed it was the divorce, but seeing you here explains more. We're not divorced, I said quickly. Too quickly. Naomi raised one perfect eyebrow. The papers aren't signed. No, I stopped, unsure why I was explaining myself to this stranger. It's complicated. It always is. She gazed at the garden's central maple tree. Alexander is a remarkable man. The simple statement carried such genuine admiration that alarm bells rang in my head. I studied her more carefully, the way she said his name, the subtle softening of her expression. How long have you worked with my husband? I asked, striving for casual interest. 3 years. She turned toward me, her composure perfect. Though our connection goes back further. We were at Harvard Business School together. My stomach tightened. Alexander had never mentioned a female classmate from Harvard who now ran his Asian division. The omission suddenly seemed significant. He's never mentioned you, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Hasn't he? Something like satisfaction flickered across her face. That's interesting. Before I could respond, her phone chimed. She glanced at it, then rose smoothly. I have a conference call. It was illuminating meeting you, Eliza. She paused, then added with deliberate casualness, Alexander and I are having dinner before your meeting tonight. A business matter. I thought you should know. As she walked away, the peaceful garden suddenly felt cold. Was this woman the reason Alexander had fled to Tokyo? Had there been something between them all this time? My old insecurities threatened to overwhelm the fragile insights I'd gained. Back in my room, I paced restlessly, fighting the urge to text Alexander and demand explanations. That was the old Eliza, reactive, insecure, creating problems where perhaps none existed. Instead, I forced myself to breathe deeply and examine my feelings. Yes, Naomi was beautiful and accomplished. Yes, she clearly admired Alexander. But his unhappiness in our marriage had stemmed from my behavior, not an affair. The journal entries I'd read contained no hint of another woman, only pain over losing connection with me. By 8:30, I'd changed 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that Alexander had always loved. I arrived at the bar early, claiming a quiet corner table. 9 o'clock came and went. Then 9:15. By 9:30, my resolve was faltering, scenarios of Alexander and Naomi laughing over dinner torturing my imagination. At 9:45, just as I was gathering my purse to leave, Alexander appeared in the doorway. He scanned the room, eyes finding mine immediately. Relief washed over me, until I noticed his expression. He looked shattered, as if the intervening hours had aged him years. He crossed to my table, movement stiff with tension. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, not sitting down. Dinner ran longer than expected. "With Naomi Tanaka," I said quietly. Surprise flickered across his face. "You've met her?" "This afternoon." She made a point of introducing herself. Alexander sighed heavily, finally sliding into the chair opposite mine. "She shouldn't have done that." "Why not?" "Is there something I shouldn't know about your relationship with her?" The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. This was exactly the pattern we needed to break, my accusations, his withdrawal. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. That wasn't fair. Alexander studied me, something like wonder crossing his face. "No, it wasn't. But a month ago, you wouldn't have recognized that." His observation startled me into silence. "Naomi and I dated briefly at Harvard," he said after a moment. "It ended badly. She took a position with a competitor specifically to prove she could outperform me. When my father died and I restructured the company, I hired her because she's brilliant, not because of our history." "You never told me about her," I said softly. "No, I didn't." He met my gaze directly. "Because it wasn't relevant. Because she means nothing to me romantically. Because I loved you and only you from the moment we met, Eliza." Past tense. Loved. The word hung between us like a verdict. "And now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Alexander's eyes held such profound sadness that my chest physically ached. "I don't know," he admitted. "Reading my journal, yes, I know you found it. What did you think?" "That I never really saw you," I whispered, tears threatening. "That I was so afraid of being hurt that I hurt you first. That I've been punishing you for my father's sins." He nodded slowly. "And tonight, when you thought something might be happening between Naomi and me, what did you feel?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Jealous." "But then?" "I tried to trust what I know about you. The man I married wouldn't cheat, wouldn't lie. Even when I gave you every reason to pull away, you remained honest. That's who you are, Alexander." Something shifted in his expression, the faintest spark of hope behind the pain. "Dinner with Naomi tonight wasn't business," he said quietly. "She offered me a clean slate. A new beginning with someone who wants what I can give. Someone who sees me." My heart seemed to stop. "And what did you say?" "I told her I'm still in love with my wife." His voice broke on the last word. "That despite everything, despite how badly you've hurt me, I can't imagine my life without you in it." The tears I'd been holding back spilled over. "Alexander." "But loving you isn't enough," he continued. "Not anymore. I need to know that you see me, really see me. That you want this marriage enough to do the work, to heal whatever drives you to push away the people who love you most. I do, I said fiercely. I'll do anything, therapy, marriage counseling, whatever it takes. He reached across the table, his fingers hesitantly brushing mine. The first touch we'd shared in weeks. There's something else you should know, he said, his expression unreadable. Something I decided before I knew you were coming to Tokyo. My throat tightened with renewed fear. What is it? I've taken a 6-month sabbatical from the company. I'm going to our house in New Zealand. Alone. He squeezed my hand gently. I need time, Eliza. Space to figure out who I am outside of us, outside of my family's company. 6 months, I echoed, the prospect of such separation physically painful. Unless... He hesitated. Unless you want to come with me. The vulnerability in his eyes took my breath away. Not to pick up where we left off, but to start over. To really know each other this time. As his words sank in, I realized he was offering something precious beyond measure, not just forgiveness, but the chance to rebuild from the foundation up. There would be no quick fix, no easy return to comfortable patterns. What he proposed would require dismantling everything we thought we knew about each other and ourselves. It terrified me. And yet, for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I wanted. Yes, I whispered, grasping his hand tightly. Yes. The New Zealand house wasn't what most people pictured when they heard Billionaire's retreat. No sprawling mansion with an army of staff, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Instead, Alexander had purchased a modern cedar cabin nestled against ancient native forest, overlooking a secluded bay on the South Island. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, the nearest town a 40-minute drive along winding coastal roads. I bought it the year before we met, Alexander explained as we carried our luggage inside. I needed somewhere no one could find me. The simplicity of the place took my breath away, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the wild landscape, the interior warm with natural wood and minimal furnishings. No artwork on the walls, no decorative objects cluttering surfaces. Just space, light, and the overwhelming presence of nature. You've never brought me here, I said, running my fingers along a smooth wooden counter. No. He set down his bag, expression contemplative. This place was always my escape. I think I was afraid. Of what? That you'd find it boring. Too isolated. Too simple. I moved to the windows, gazing at the choppy grey sea beyond. You never gave me the chance to show you who I really am either, Alexander. And that became our work over the following weeks, learning to see each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. We started with separate bedrooms, establishing boundaries neither of us had respected properly before. Each morning, we hiked along coastal trails, conversations flowing more easily with our eyes on the horizon rather than each other. Tell me something about yourself I don't know, became our daily challenge. I wanted to be a marine biologist until I was 14, Alexander shared one misty morning. Then my father explained the Reed legacy, and that dream disappeared. I used to write poetry, I confessed another day. I stopped after my first gallery show. Thought I had to choose one creative outlet. Show me, he said simply. That night, I wrote my first poem in years, raw, unpolished words about fear and forgiveness. Watching Alexander read it, his eyes softening at certain lines, created a new kind of intimacy between us. We began therapy, individually and together, via video sessions with a renowned marriage counselor in New York. The process was excruciating at times. I confronted the abandonment issues that had shaped my behavior. Alexander unpacked the burden of family expectations that had taught him to suppress his own needs. I never felt I deserved unconditional love, he admitted during our third joint session. Every relationship in my life came with performance metrics. Even with Eliza, I kept waiting to fail some invisible test. And I kept administering those tests, I whispered, the pattern suddenly clear. Looking for proof you'd eventually leave. Slowly, painfully, we began building something new from the ashes of our former relationship. We cooked together, learning to navigate the small kitchen as a team. We read books aloud in the evenings, discovering shared interests we'd never explored. At night, we retreated to our separate rooms, the door between us closed but no longer locked. 3 months into our sabbatical, Alexander received news that his mother had suffered a minor stroke. The crisis required his immediate return to New York, disrupting the fragile bubble we'd created. "Come with me," he said, packing hurriedly. "Please." I hesitated, fear gripping my chest. New York meant reality, his family, my friends, the life where we'd failed each other so completely. Were we strong enough yet? "I need to do this alone," he said, misreading my silence. "I understand." "No," I said, reaching for his hand. "We do this together or not at all." That's what we promised. The return to Manhattan was jarring after months of natural beauty and silence. Alexander's family apartment on Park Avenue hummed with medical staff, relatives, and the inescapable energy of the city. His mother, Elizabeth, always formidable despite her diminutive stature, regarded me with surprise when I entered her bedroom beside Alexander. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said bluntly, her speech slightly slurred from the stroke. "I go where my husband goes now," I answered, matching her directness. Something like respect flickered in her eyes. Later that evening, she called me to her room alone. "He's different," she observed. "More centered." "You both are." "We're trying," I said simply. "Good." She adjusted her silk robe with dignity. "Because despite what you may believe, Eliza, I've always thought you were exactly what Alexander needed. Someone to challenge him. Someone who sees beyond the reed name and fortune." "I didn't always see him clearly," I admitted. "None of us do," she replied with unexpected gentleness. "That's the work of a lifetime." We stayed in New York for 2 weeks. The city tested our new foundations, business emergencies demanded Alexander's attention, gallery openings tempted me back into my old social circle. Naomi appeared at a hospital benefit, elegant as ever, her eyes calculating as they moved between Alexander and me. "I hear congratulations are in order," she said, voice honeyed with false sincerity. "A touching reconciliation." "Thank you, Naomi." Alexander's hand found the small of my back, a subtle but clear statement of where he stood. Later that night, in the privacy of the guest room we now shared at his mother's apartment, I voiced the question that had haunted me since Tokyo. "If I hadn't come after you, if I'd simply signed the papers, would you have started something with her?" Alexander considered the question with the thoughtful honesty that had become the hallmark of our rebuilt relationship. "I can't say for certain," he admitted finally. I was deeply hurt, profoundly lonely. She represented a life where I wouldn't have to be vulnerable. Where expectations would be clear and manageable. The answer stung, but I valued its truth more than a comforting lie. "But," he continued, drawing me closer, "she was never what I wanted. Just what I thought I deserved." When we returned to New Zealand, something had shifted between us. The separate bedrooms felt suddenly unnecessary, a relic of pain we were moving beyond. The night we shared a bed again wasn't about passion but presence, holding each other through nightmares, whispering fears and hopes in the darkness, waking to find ourselves still entangled. On our last day in New Zealand, 6 months to the day since we'd arrived, Alexander suggested a hike to a remote cliff overlooking the bay. "I have something to show you," he said mysteriously. The trail was challenging, winding through dense forest before emerging onto a windswept bluff. There, carved into a weather-worn piece of driftwood mounted on a stone, were our initials. "I did this the day after we met," Alexander confessed, his voice nearly lost in the wind. "I flew here directly from that charity gala, convinced I'd found the person I wanted to spend my life with." I traced the rough carving with trembling fingers. "You never told me." "I was afraid you'd think it was ridiculous. Too sentimental for the controlled businessman you married." "I would have loved knowing this existed," I said softly. "I know that now." He took my hands in his. "Eliza, these past 6 months have been the hardest and most important of my life. I've learned I can survive losing you. But I've also learned I don't want to. From his pocket, he withdrew a simple band of twisted silver. This isn't a renewal of our old vows, he explained. Those belong to a marriage built on incomplete foundations. This is a new promise entirely. To see you. To let myself be seen. To remember that love isn't about perfection but about choosing each other every day, especially on the days when that choice is difficult. Tears blurred my vision as he slipped the ring onto my finger beside my original wedding band. I made it from silver coins I found on this beach, he said. It's not perfect. It's everything, I interrupted, pulling him close. As we stood on that windswept cliff, the future stretched before us, not the perfect fairy tale I'd once imagined, but something infinitely more valuable. A love tested by fire, tempered by pain, strengthened by forgiveness. A marriage built not on fantasy but on the hard-won territory of truth. We would return to our lives in New York. Alexander would resume leadership of his company with new boundaries protecting our relationship. I would open my own small gallery, showcasing emerging artists alongside my rediscovered poetry. We would continue therapy, continue challenging each other, continue the daily work of truly seeing one another. There would be difficult days ahead. Old patterns would threaten to re-emerge. The work of marriage, real marriage, would never be complete. But standing there, with the man I'd nearly lost, the man I was still learning to love properly, I understood something profound. The most beautiful love stories aren't about perfect people who never hurt each other. They're about imperfect people who choose to stay, who fight through pain toward healing, who do the impossible work of truly knowing another human being. And as Alexander pulled me into his arms, the silver ring catching the last light of sunset, I finally understood what had been missing in our first 7 years together. The courage to be fully known, with all my flaws and fears exposed. The wisdom to see that love isn't found in grand gestures but in daily choices. The faith that what breaks can sometimes be rebuilt stronger than before. This wasn't an ending but a beginning, the first day of a marriage that would be harder, more honest, and infinitely more precious than the glossy illusion we'd once shared. And this time, I wasn't going anywhere. Thank you for joining Eliza and Alexander on their journey from heartbreak to healing. Their story reminds us that sometimes we must lose what we value most to truly understand its worth. Have you ever had to rebuild something precious that seemed beyond repair? Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of love, loss, and second chances touched your heart, please subscribe for more emotional journeys that explore the complicated reality of human relationships. Your support means everything to writers who pour their hearts into these stories. What relationship challenge would you like to see explored in a future story? Let me know in the comments.